against the coup-minded attempts by the Americans and the member states of the Lima Group and of the Organization of American States. Basically, this is a deep capitalist crisis, which is made worse by the imperialist sanctions imposed by the United States and the EU as they meddle in the internal affairs of another country. The hypocritical concerns of the EU about the migrants and the refugees are just a facade. What is really happening is that the European monopolies are intervening, especially when they do not have governments which are to their liking. This country, Venezuela, is rich in resources, be it gas, oil, or precious metals. And the United States and the European Union are competing with their international competitors and have been co-exploiting the country for many years. The USA and the European Union have coup-like intentions. They want to get to unseat the elected president, and we must speak up for the communists who are fighting for the freedom of Venezuela. The people of the country are the only ones who are entitled and legitimate to organize their own future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Antonio Tajani, for 1.5 minutes.
7.000 persone sono sotto processo per
Thank you, President. The number of political prisoners remains constant in Venezuela, between 300 and 400 people behind bars for their ideas. We had seen 12,000 men, women and children put in prison for political reasons. Mrs. Bachelet says that the death squads have assassinated 5,200 people in 2018, 1,500 until May of 2019. And these are the courageous communists defending liberty and freedom and democracy. Thousands of people, millions of people are leaving the country. The indigenous population is being struck down and massacred, often in silence, to a deafening silence. Gold and drugs are being trafficked to the Netherlands. People disappear, desaparecidos on a daily basis. The internet is being closed down. The armed militias are trying to stifle resistance in the universities. An increase in dengue fever and tuberculosis and other diseases is what we are seeing. And the High Representative, we must ask ourselves whether the solution to the situation is simply by increasing the humanitarian assistance. We do not know where that money goes because the Maduro regime has its grips on the assistance which is getting through. And I agree we've got to see a return to democracy. But Mr. Borrell, High Representative, we'll need more courage than the EU institutions have shown. Except for the European Parliament, the other institutions have not been brave enough to send President Maduro home and to intervene robustly against a regime which is starving and massacring its own people. I think that you've got to find the courage in the Commission, and the High Rep in the institutions must find the courage.
Thank you very much. Madam Maria Manuel Leitao Marques, for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam President. High Representative, the situation in Venezuela is the most serious migratory crisis that we currently have. If nothing changes, it's forecast that the number of refugees and immigrants from Venezuela will go from 4.5 to 6.5 million in December 2020. This is a crisis that affects the region and neighboring companies, especially Colombia and even Europe. Just the small island of Madeira in Portugal in 2018 has already welcomed and integrated around 4,000 immigrants from Venezuela. So with all of this, even if this is the most important migratory crisis, it's also that which is least supported financially. Only 48% of the financial commitments entered into by donors were actually complied with in 2019. It's therefore important that the European Union continues its work, political work, diplomatic work, and that the financial commitments be respected. And also that we assess the impact of economic sanctions, studying possible alternatives creatively. like that outlined by the High Representative, a programme like Oil for Food. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jordi Cañas for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Venezuela is experiencing a situation of humanitarian emergency. 4.5 million people who have had to leave the country. You could be talking about 6 million by 2020. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people leaving the country every single day. And this is not because of a war, nor is it because of an unexpected natural disaster. It is actually the consequence of the actions taken by someone we know by name, Nicolás Maduro and his regime. So what can we do under the circumstances? Well, we could do something very simple. We could give democracy back to Venezuela. Anything else will just help perpetrate this situation, glorify it. We need to hear a clear voice from the Commission and from the Parliament. We need to bring democracy back to Venezuela. That should be our discourse. We have to remember that there are people being persecuted in Venezuela because of their political opinions. We've got assassinations, indigenous communities who are being murdered. And all of this is happening while at the same time many of us are looking the other way. So we need to put an end to this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Madam Silvia Sardone for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam President. For the umpteenth time, we have a resolution on Venezuela, and it shows a complete bankruptcy. Maduro, I think that Europe has been disappointing without attacking the socialist and communist model, which has been incarnated by Chavez and then by Maduro now. It is a model which has brought Venezuela, a rich country, oil rich, to hunger. A quarter of the population is leaving the country. The shops are empty. The shelves are empty. Inflation is in the 4 digits. And there's a lack of medicines. And people are having to eat their pets. And MEPs in this chamber should understand at long last what the socialist model brings in its wake, what real socialism brings, what communism brings. What they bring is poverty and death. Protests have been cancelled out. The opponents with repression, press freedoms have died a death. And Europe must wake up. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Tomasz Piotr Poręba for 1 minute. Thank you very much, Madam President. It is a fact that Venezuela is a country with the largest oil deposits, so it ought to be a country where people lead a happy life and fulfill their dreams. Unfortunately, it is not like that. We've had some debates already about the country in the past. I am convinced that there's frankly not much we can do. Millions have left the country. There have been extrajudicial killings in this country, hundreds of them. So in my opinion, it is a time to send a strong signal to this country that the EU will no longer accept such attitudes. And hence, our call to Mr. Borrell, as it is one of the most significant missions for you in the coming years, to broaden sanctions onto the representatives of the regime and call for restoring democracy in this country. Unless the European Parliament and the institutions have a strong common voice, we will only be able to debate the thing and nothing will change. Thank you very much, Madam Sandra Pereira, for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam President. This Parliament, every now and then, does protest about Venezuela and the Republic there. And once again, we're discussing this. And this is involvement in other countries' affairs. There have been attempts at destabilization, coup d'etat, more and more intense situations, and now really it's hypocritical to look at the migratory crisis without looking at the causes. Peace, social protection, healthcare, combating poverty and exclusion are all things that are essential factors to fix and attract populations. Obviously, when you promote the opposite happens. The Venezuelan citizens and the Portuguese population there are suffering as a result of the situation. Now we have a lack of stability and people obviously are leaving the country. The regime is actually
going to change events at a time when so close to us on our own borders, Turkey has got a completely free hand. It's able to call the shots. Erdogan is able to do as he sees fit. He's able to allow migrants, refugees to cross the Greek border, go into Greece. And not only does he do that as he sees fit, he is rewarded handsomely for his efforts. And I think we should focus on matters close to home rather than things happening in distant parts of the world. Thank you.
Mr. Paulo Rangel for 1 minute.
Thank you, Chair.
I'd like to start by saying that I categorically reject all of the statements made by Sandra Pereira from the Portuguese Communist Party, who is trying to support the regime which is doing so much harm to its people. It's a great shame that we've reached a stage where MEPs are defending the policies of Maduro. Crisis in Latin America. 4.7 million people have already left, and we're likely to see 6 million people leaving. I have been in Colombia. I know the situation that the Venezuelan refugees find themselves in neighboring countries. I know that this is a desperate humanitarian situation, and the European Union can do more, should do more. The European member states have a responsibility to bring Maduro's regime to an end and to restore democracy to Venezuela and dignity to the Venezuelan people.
Thank you very much. Mr. Tonino Picula for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. High Representative. 4.5 million people have already left Venezuela. We expect that by the end of next year, this number will increase by 2 million. This is definitely the largest number of refugees from one state at the present-day world. This tragedy is also accompanied by the poorest financing donor program of international community.